Now, the sobering reality of our nation's roads continues to be a major talking point, with approximately 12,000 lives tragically lost annually to road accidents. This alarming statistic has ignited a renewed discussion on road safety and the relevance of the K53 driving license test established in the 1980s. Joining us this morning to shed light on this issue and potential pathways forward is Eugene Herbert, the CEO of Master Drive. Eugene, thank you so much for the time. Good morning to you. So what, K53 ultimately was launched officially, I think it was in 1990. Before that, we had the K52 method, which is very interesting. But what I wanted to point out, and if you'll allow me to just spend just a quick second on this, according to Zutobi, I'm not sure on the exact credibility of this, but they compiled a list of 53 countries and their driver safety. They claim that South Africa is the worst country in terms of road safety by drivers, highlighting particular problem being seatbelt usage in South Africa, with an estimated 31% of front seat occupants buckling up, compared to Norway's 98%. We also have the highest rate of alcohol-related deaths at 57.5%, followed by Ireland at 38.5% and Cuba at 33.5%. So, my question to you then this morning is K53 the problem?
Well, there's a bigger problem than that, but let's just talk K53. If you're asking whether or not it's outdated, yes, it is outdated. And let me just share some reasons why. The system that we operate at the moment in South Africa is based on the fact that somebody goes to a test center, writes an exam, and then goes out with an instructor, and that instructor then determines whether or not they get a license. Now, the challenge with that is people or drivers get a piece of paper that says they are allowed to drive on the road. But the perception of that the driver is now they've got a right to drive on their roads. Driving or having a license is not a right. It carries with it a responsibility. Now, thinking about the tests that happened, a figure going back some years, and I can't quote the veracity of it now, but it was estimated that about 50% of driver's licenses had been obtained fraudulently, which means that every second driver that you and I encounter on the road is statistically not licensed effectively. Now, what happens in the process? Individuals will go through a series of training programs, with tests, etc., and it costs them a lot of money because they fail. So they'll end up with a bill of 4, 5, maybe even more thousand. Then they look at it and they say, but hold on, I know somebody where if I pay 2,000, I can get my license immediately. So that license, whilst not illegal, is still being issued fraudulently. However, whether they wrote the test, did the test or not. Now, even if they've gone through the K53 system, the person now gets tested in a suburban area. A, they do not drive at night. They do not drive on highways where speeds are probably 120 in excess. And as a result of that, they learn very little about the skill of driving on the road. Yep. And as a result, that accounts for some of the accidents, or many of them, I believe. And if I can just revert to your discussion about Zutobi, bearing in mind, please, that they are a driver's education company based overseas. They gather statistical data from around the world. Now, the source of that data, and please, I'm not for a moment saying South African drivers are not bad, that they do terrible things. I'm not saying that. But for example, that report doesn't have a look at what's happening in Ukraine. Yeah. We don't know what's over there. So let's have a look at what the real cause is, which is driver behavior, and see how we can change that.
Okay, so we don't need to scrap it. We just need to update it then, ultimately, is what you're saying, right? Because we just need a new system and a new way of doing things, which then, unfortunately, fortunately, should I say, cannot then be infiltrated fraudulently, as the current system may certainly be pointing towards.
I'm interested that you should make that comment. So maybe that's the start. We look at the system and say, how can it not be broken before we actually launch it? How can people not monetize it in their own best interests? But yes, we have a system, and let's accept that at this point in time, it's the only system. I know there's legislation pending for a fact that a driver, once they've obtained their license, at 18, you can go and sit your test. But the proposal, and this may fall in line with other countries around the world, where there's a period of probation almost, that for a period of time, whether it's a year or whatever, that individual cannot drive after dark, for example. They cannot carry passengers with them or something like that. So there is provision down the line, but our challenge is that I don't believe that whatever system that we introduce, they will speak to the root cause of the fraud and the corruption that's associated with it. And we see this when we train drivers. They've got a license, but they can't drive. And there's that old question about the code 10.
Yes.
Because it's easier. And there's a new terminology, category C. They can get a license more easily. And as a result, they don't have to do all the normal things that you and I trust, would have done in order to qualify for a license. And they are then sharing the roads with us in shopping centers, etc., where many of the incidents occur. So let's look to the future. And I do trust that we are positive about how we can change behavior. And I think just having a discussion like this on TV, and sensitizing people to the fact that we need to change the way we engage with other motorists is but a start.
It also then becomes a question mark for me anyway about reflexes. Should we not even be testing that at the very least as well then to kind of ask how quick are you actually in reacting to certain things on the road? And I'm not saying that because we all need to have the agility of a Formula One driver here, but certain things do certainly happen. You end up driving for 5 people in and around your own space sometimes. And if you're unable to react to all of those, you could just compound the elements that are ahead of you.
Well, by the way, I thought you were in line for Formula One, so maybe I misheard. But just talk to reaction. There's a statement people say we've got an average reaction time of half a second. Truth be told, it's not. Imagine you're driving down the road and somebody, as a driver, not you, is busy on their cell phone, or they're busy doing something else. It's called distracted while driving. The car in front of you slams on its brakes. Now, the ideal following distance should probably be 3 seconds, maybe more. But most drivers are sitting at about 1 to 2 seconds. Now, if we believe what they tell us about a reaction time of half a second, by the time you react, if that vehicle, if you were traveling at 120 kilometers an hour, if you reacted in time, it would take you just over 100 meters to come to a stop.
Wow.
But you reduce that time, you reduce the reaction because we're distracted on our cell phone, reading messages or something. That's one of the reasons why you have so many rear-end collisions. So reaction is critical, but attention to the task of driving is even more critical. If you allow sufficient space between you and the vehicle in front of you, if that driver who is an idiot does something stupid, you can then effectively control what's happening in front of you. So do you see where we're going with behavior?
Yeah.
But of course, with cars, with the modern technology, and that, by the way, is one of the reasons why the old system, the K53, hasn't taken into account the new technology in vehicles. What they do, you've got hill start assist. So effectively, if you went to a test, the car would just pass the test for you. So there's a number of things, but by sensitizing people to these things, I do trust viewers that will look at it and say, let me engage in a more positive way with other motorists, because that is what we start talking about defensive driving.
We did question Zitobi, as you said then a little bit earlier, with regards to its list, and I mean it's only 53 countries as well, which is very little in comparison to the rest of the world. But the biggest issue that they do highlight could still be very important. One, buckling up. We have, 31% of front seat occupants are buckling up. 2, alcohol-related deaths. Should law enforcement perhaps not be a little bit more stringent on elements like that as well?
I'm glad you raised that, and it's very pertinent because those statistics about seatbelts, in fact, if that is accurate, I'm surprised. I thought it was even worse than that. By the way, the AA is conducting over the Easter period, an exercise with the Free State Department of Community Safety, where they will be checking to see vehicles during this Easter period, whether people are buckling up, etc. But when you look at the fact that we do things that are totally inappropriate. Now, for example, you mentioned front seatbelt users, but what about the rear seatbelt users?
Yeah.
Do you know that the body's mass, and let's just assume a child weighs at around about 30 kgs or something. If that infant is not secured, and by the way, the worst for me is the people who allow their kids to stand on the front seat and while they're driving. That body's mass is accelerated up to 30 times. So can you imagine the child behind the driver, the driver slams on brakes, they may well have their seatbelt on, but the force of that child could impact on the driver. And if that child were in the front seat, it would hit the dashboard, and the damage we know is so serious. But if we can just talk to just two things that I wish during this Easter period that we can get drivers to do, is not drink and drive. Everybody thinks now I can have one drink. It doesn't matter what you think you can handle it or not. Don't drink and drive. That's the one thing. Secondly, do not be distracted. A major insurance company spoke a little while ago that's got a driver monitoring app, and upwards of 60% of the incidents reported as crashes, the driver had been using their cell phone. So now let's stop doing that. And then, of course, let's buckle up, because it's the most effective proven resource to prevent fatalities in the event of an accident. So if we just cooperate, and that's not rocket science that we're asking drivers to do. It's simple things that we could and should do every day.